understanding dimensions in text in AutoCAD can be pretty difficult, so I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. It used to be even more convoluted than it is now, so you're kind of lucky that you caught it in the last few releases. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own dimension styles. So if you look here, it probably opens up in your Home tab, but you have one called Annotate. Annotate allows you to do a lot of different architectural annotations if you're in the architecture version. What I'm doing now will also work for the standard version as well. So what you'll see is on this side here, this portion here, this is text, and when do this click down here, these are different styles of text. So we could set it up to where we have text at different sizes, different fonts, whatever. We can set up a style and then use multiple styles in here if we want. I'm only talking about text because it's related to dimensions as well. We can also do the same thing for dimension styles, right? So we have different types of dimensions. So when I pull down here, we'll have different types of dimension styles as well. I'm going to start with the most basic and just go with text. And we're going to create our own style. So let's do the pull down and say Manage Text Styles. This will bring up that list of all of those options here, and then all of the options we can change. One thing to pay attention to is this little end section view of a scale, of an architectural scale. This is the feature we want to pay attention to. This is called annotative text. This is text that will change size, change its scale as we set scales in AutoCAD. So this is what we're going to do. But we're going to start with a new one, and I'm just going to call this SARC 162 text. You can call yours anything you want. But I want to make sure annotative is checked. And then I'm going to do this here, paper text height. This is the printed height, no matter what scale. So in my case here, I'm just going to start with 5 millimeters. And I'm going to change the font. So anytime you see this SHX extension, that's an AutoCAD font, and they are one of the ugliest fonts on the planet. So never ever use any of the AutoCAD SHX fonts. What you want is any of the other fonts we've talked about. We've talked about this extensively, so I shouldn't have to talk too much more about it. So I'm just going to, for the sake of this, use Helvetica. You can change the font style, we'll just do regular, but that's all we really need to check is the font type, and that it's annotative, and the size that we want to have it print out at. And I'm going to say set current. All right, so that means it'll show up here. So when I hit close, we'll see we have text here. So before I actually go into dimensions, which is most of this is about, because I encourage you to use just the text in InDesign rather than in AutoCAD, you can use this text here. And I'll show you what annotative text means. If you notice down here at the bottom, we have a 1 to 100 scale. This is the annotation scale. In other words, this is what AutoCAD is looking to, that the scale that you're going to print out at. So it will scale your text appropriately so that at 1 to 100, it will print at 5 millimeters tall. Remember, we draw everything full scale in AutoCAD, so it has to have a real world dimension of 5 millimeters at 1 to 100 scale. So it does all that math for you. But let's say we're going to print out at 1 to 20. So I'm going to say 1 to 20. That way when I make my text, and I'll do that with some multiline text just by clicking the multiline text button there. And you just drag out a text box like any other program and say this is AutoCAD text. Now when I say close, it's adjusted its size so that at 1 to 20, that's going to be 5 millimeters tall. So I can double check my text, but let's real quick here just do a measurement of the text here in model space. You can see that it's around 100 millimeters. Right, so that is the 1 to 20 at 5 millimeters in paper space is equal to 100 millimeters in the real world. So if I come back to my printed page, here I have an A2 setup at 1 to 20 scale, and I do a measurement, we can see that it's 5 millimeters. Right, so it works, right? And that's annotative scale. So let's say I change my scale, so I'm going to come down here. When I change my scale, change my mind, I want to go 1 to 100. Notice how the scale or the text automatically updates. And when I go back to my paper, right, and I would need to adjust the scale here. Here it's the original one. One way I've taught you before is to select the frame and change it in the properties. I've also found out when you select the frame, there's a dialog that pops up here, so I can change this to 1 to 100, and you see the text did update. So let me come back out. This is at 1 to 100. Do a distance 5 millimeters, right? So it is automatically adjusting the text. Now let me try this test here. If I change the scale again to one that I haven't put in there, this is where AutoCAD starts to get weird about things. If I change it to 1 to 50, you'll notice it disappears. And that's because there is no 1 to 50 set yet in model space. So I have to go back to model space and then change this to 1 to 50, and it essentially adds that. And you can tell it's doing this because when I select the text, see how it's got 3 different size texts. So what it's essentially doing is making a copy at the right side. So now when I go back here, change this, well, I changed it to 1 to 50, so the text did appear, right? So it seems very complicated, but if you use annotative text, it's fine, right? And now I'll use dimensions. In the end, for what you're doing for this class, using text in InDesign is fine. But I needed to do the text to show you the text in order to show you the dimensions. And that you might need to do through AutoCAD because dimensioning and the look of it is very specific and very easy to do in AutoCAD. So we have our annotative text already created. Now I want to make an annotative style. So I'm going to make my own style. I'm going to go to Manage Dimension Style. So it's just like the text. I'm going to create a new one. Call it SARC162 dims. We'll start with the annotative text. This is an annotative text, meaning it will change just like the other text. And now I have a ton of options in the dimensions. The first thing I want to do is change my text style. This is the actual text over the dimensions to be the SARC162 text. That way I know it's going to be the right text. Don't worry about the preview. Sometimes it does some funny things. Don't worry about it. We'll fix it hopefully. I also want to make sure that it is annotative, and I find that by going to the fit, and it is annotative, so that's fine. So for the most part, I'm going to leave it like this for now, and we're going to troubleshoot it as it doesn't work, if that's the case, which it probably won't. Whoops. So I want to set it current, say close. Now if I go to the dimensions, any of these dimension tools, I should be able to dimension my wall. Now double checking again, I'm going to change this back to 1 to 20, and if we remember at 1 to 20 it's at 100, whoops, distance, it's at 100 millimeters. So without any snaps, that's why I'm zooming in closer. Right about 100 millimeters, perfect. And if I go back to my print and do a dimension here, we should be at 5 millimeters. Right, good. Now we can adjust some of that as well. Like I don't have to leave it at 5 millimeters. Let's go back. And I'll try it with text first before I try to mess it up on the dimension. Right, so we are putting in multiline text, calling it whatever we want. So this is the same size text. Right, but I can change what's called the paper space size. So if I need this to be bigger text, I can select it, and you'll see under the properties here we have paper text height. I can actually double this to say it was a title or something, and now that will always remain at 10 millimeters based on the annotative scale. So this will always be twice as big as that one, no matter what scale I put it at. We can probably begin to alter. Well, let's just look at some of the dimension properties. Like we have these end conditions. These are all controllable through the dimension style. I'm going to open up the dimension style again for our SARC 162. We're going to modify it. So you have options. It doesn't have to be a tick. Let's just say something else, like a datum triangle. The arrow size can have any size. Now this is relative to the paper size, so this is not an actual indication of the size on paper, although it may be, I'm not sure. But I'm not scientific about it. If I know I want it to be bigger, I'll just type in something bigger, say close, and you can see that it's made that part bigger and put the different ends in there. Right, so you can control all kinds of things through here, so feel free to play with them. Something interesting I have found, I don't know if I like it or not, but you can draw a frame around the numbers. Right, so it'll actually draw the numbers in a box. So let's just play around with a few more options here to show that you can control just about everything on this dimension style. So I'm going to come back and change it to sort of a more normative one with the architectural tick. But what I'm going to control now is go back to the lines, and I'm going to control, which I've already changed. Let me put this on what it looks like normally. All right, so here's the architectural tick. But now I can make this line extend past this line if I wanted to, just by going back to there, going to lines, and that's what this is here, extend beyond ticks. 5. Alright, so I would just play around with it until you get the look that you want. Just experiment, just have fun. So the observant among you might have started thinking to yourself, well, you're telling us all of this for print. When it comes to the screen, does this all work the same? And the real answer is not really. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've recorded and deleted and recorded and deleted, and I think the best thing to do, you have two options. One is to just think about it in relative terms and make sure all of your drawings when you output them. So let's say I'm going to output this directly from model space. I might say to output this at the scale, the annotation scale I have is 1 to 20. So I'll use 1 to 20. Right, it's not going to be small enough because I'm outputting to an A4. So I might just leave it at 1 to 20. In essence, what you want to do is leave it at a known. That's something that's going to be consistent. So if I leave it at 1 to 20 on an A3, make sure I'm picking a window that covers the one with the annotation. Right, so it'll cover it. Now this will import into InDesign as a PDF just fine, but what you want to be careful of is that you're doing all of that consistently, and then if you are scaling down with the AutoFit in InDesign, you're doing it proportionally, meaning you're using the numbers up in the line, they're not on this in InDesign, and scaling it directly. The other thing you can do is actually just put a white rectangle over this in InDesign and then put new text in there, but leave this the same. But either way, you're still going to run into some potential issues. You're going to have to be systematic in how your dimensioning is used so that the scale, the sizing of your tick marks, or however you use the dimensions in the text is consistent. Unless someone comes up with a better answer, or if I think of one, that's the only advice I can give you on that. So it does get a little bit not so scientific, let's say, not so calculated in creating the screen layout. But that's the best I can offer. So that's all I'm going to do for now. That way you have sort of an understanding of text and dimensions in AutoCAD. That way if you want to use dimensioning in your project, you can do that. InDesign, Illustrator, none of these other ones do these dimensioning automatically. You actually would have to draw them. So this is probably one of the faster ways to do it.